Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. Hey guys, how are y'all doing tonight? I know it's a bit late. Hey Donna. Yeah, members, there is a folder. I dropped the link for the folder itself. I think yesterday it was it yesterday? That I put the link for a direct document in there. I put a folder link in there today, and it's going to have 4 of the documents that we're going to be talking about today. It's the only 4 that I put in there. It's these top 4. Well, I'll show you in a second, but it's the top 4 when they're talking about the motion of limine for the alibi, because it's just the very beginning things. I will end up putting more in there as we go along. And I also just added, I think, the Blaker PCA to the members only folder. Again, whenever you guys click on that, it sends me a notification and then I accept it. So if I don't like instantly get to it, I'm not denying you access. I just haven't gotten to my phone. Yet. Hey, I've got something to say. Yeah, there's a lot of documents incoming. Now, as far as me checking, as I sat down here about 5 minutes ago, they have not released any new documents from the stuff that I showed you guys yesterday. And we also do not have anything else showing up in the case summary. So yeah, we're only going to go over the alibi one today. And honestly, it's sort of just like the same argument that they've had for a while. Basically trying to get Kohberger to not be able to keep the word that he has given in this case. Because what has the defense? Technically, we don't even need to start with that. Let's start with Bryan. What has Bryan basically said from the very beginning? That the evidence in the case is going to be what actually proves that he's not the right guy. That his cell phone data, that's what was said in Pennsylvania by his Pennsylvania lawyer. That he said from the beginning that his cell phone data is going to prove where he was. They have my cell phone. It's going to show I wasn't there. Something along those lines is what he ended up stating in Pennsylvania. And he has kept that by standing silent and saying everything that comes from cross-examination, everything that comes from the actual evidence that they are claiming they have against me, that's where my innocence is going to show. I'm going to prove it with their own evidence, okay? All that the state has been trying to do this entire time is stop him from doing that. Claiming that if he's not allowed, well, they want the court to declare that he's not going to be allowed to use third-party evidence, meaning cross-examination or anything from expert witnesses or anything of the evidence, apparently, in order to prove his innocence, which is exactly what he's been claiming this entire time. He's going to prove they've got the wrong guy, that they have that actual factual evidence in this case that they are using against him is wrong. And that's what he's claimed this whole time. They don't want him to be able to do that. And their reasoning for that, I guess, really isn't wrong if they're trying to abide by the actual rules. If the rules really do declare that he has to have names and addresses and all these proofs and all these things, and that he just can't be like, well, this is where I wasn't, and now you can tell me everything else, which in the end, it's the state's responsibility to prove any of this stuff in anyway. But he's not coming out and saying anything else other than the evidence is showing already, like your own stuff is telling all these people already that you're wrong. I didn't make this turn here. My phone didn't go off network whenever you're telling everybody that it went off network. I went this way instead of that way. Like, you're full of crap. So they don't want him to be able to do that because he's not giving addresses and names and blah, 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 which is part of the rules. But how many people get out in the middle of the night and go drive alone? We've talked about this a lot on this channel. A lot. My father, who is 70, will get in his Jeep in the middle of a freaking crazy storm or in a silent night and drive hours in the middle of the night towards the border just to watch what's going on and then go back home and be hours on the road in the middle of the night with no map, no GPS, no nothing, because he knows the way. And he just goes. And nobody knows. He doesn't tell me or my sister anything. And he lives by himself. The only person that's going to know that he's left that house is the dog. So whenever he gets back, who's going to know? The dog. See, night drives. So many people do it. And if he's somebody who stays up all night, if people say that he's been up vacuuming and doing all these things late at night, I mean, hello. Most people these days don't sleep very well. Most people these days have hella insomnia. And most college students, they don't sleep at night anyway. So nothing about his behavior so far has shown me anything. And then with these titles of things that I showed you guys yesterday are incoming, they're basically proving that the majority of us that were speculating that there was some sort of maybe Asperger's, autism spectrum, low end, like high functioning or however you would call it, like he has a tinge of the tism, I guess. Like that's what they're basically claiming at this point, that we've pretty much been right about that this whole time. And that also would explain so many behaviors. That doesn't make it serial killy. That doesn't make it psycho. No, he's got autism. Autistic people just do things differently. And for him to, if you go back and remember the way that the pool party people like described Bryan, right? I remember that the guy with the really long black hair said that he had only met Bryan for the first time like at that pool party, and then he saw Bryan again like on a hiking trail somewhere later on. And it took him a minute to realize who he was, but Bryan like instantly knew him, and he thought that he felt a little bit too excited to see him because he'd only met him like one time prior. That if that's not an autistic behavior, to be overly excited about somebody that you have like a very clear recollection of because of how your brain works, but maybe they're a little bit fuzzy to you. Like I've seen so many stories of people with autism that behave that way. And then on top of that, he's like hella smart. That's another autistic trait, hella smartness. Okay. It all adds up. It all adds up. So it's going to be interesting to read that stuff. And that must be the medical thing that they've really been talking about. So I've really been wondering, now that they've been talking so much about like the medical aspects of stuff, if maybe were they looking for like the autism gene? Was that something that maybe they were searching for because of something that they noticed in the DNA sample itself that they're claiming that they saw? Because they are talking a lot about medical stuff. I just find this interesting. It's interesting. Moonlit Baby said, I noticed a huge uptick in guilter groups on Facebook. I so want to comment, this group paid for by the G family, but it's probably too disrespectful. No, they have been planning like a smear campaign against Bryan since the change of venue. And I'm hearing that from more than one source. Yeah, Chief, I think you're right. Chief says if they're going to use mental health evidence, I think it has to be introduced in mitigation. Yeah, because I don't know if he's in here right now, but in the members only live, I found out that Idaho doesn't allow you to use a mental insanity defense. They don't allow you to do that. Maybe like using it in different ways for like medical diagnoses, like autism or something like that. Maybe that would be something that they use for like mitigation purposes. But when it comes to any sort of like pleading of any way, they're like, no, Idaho doesn't allow that. I don't know what Bryan Kohberger is. Is that a missing person? I have no idea. Yeah, and that's another thing that explains the gloves, okay? Especially right after the freaking vid, bro. The vid was still very much a thing to a lot of people whenever this happened in 2022. I know that seems crazy to think about, but there was a majority of people, especially people that already had like tendencies towards things, that were still masking up and wearing gloves and being like really super careful, overly washing their hands, all the things. Okay, that's only 2022. There were still places still in like semi-ass lockdown in 2022. Okay. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Like really at all, especially going to a grocery store. Like Howie Mandel was like that. Like he just recently really kind of started getting where he can like touch people and it not like freak him the hell out. But Howie Mandel was like that, like complete germaphobe, gloves everywhere, wouldn't touch something if somebody else touched something, wouldn't give nobody a hug, wouldn't pat nobody on the back. Kind of hard to be like a congratulatory show host for like a singing competition whenever you can't even like high five anybody, right? Yeah, no, he was like that. He was like that. Okay, I'll write it down and see. I'll look it down and see. Well, they are like putting, there's like 2 documents now that they're giving information on his autistic diagnosis. And if it comes in there as evidence just to say that he's not autistic, I don't know why it would be there. I don't know why it would be there. So we're going to see what it says. Yeah, he was a big germaphobe. Gloves everywhere, wouldn't touch nothing. Yeah, the entire case has been. Yeah, that's for sure. Absolutely wild. Okay, so what my original plan was, and if I end up finding it later, I will put a video out and show it. What my original plan was to go in and play the clip from the motion hearing that they're talking about in this instead of just reading the transcript. But you guys, do you remember the hearing where Mercer and Becca Barlow and Lisa Larkin and Vargas first came out on the scene? The one where we were introduced to Vargas right before the feds came knocking on her door in the middle of the night. The one that was like really important, where I think it was Lisa Larkin brought in a PowerPoint. We learned all about the loopholes and stuff. That was the first time we saw all them heard all these things. Okay. That's the one that they're referencing from August 18th of 2023. That is the one hearing that is all over the place scattered. It is all over the place scattered. It was from before the court took hold of the cameras. So half of it is on court TV. Some of it's on Law and Crime or whatever. Some of it's over on like part 2 is on like an Arizona station. The East Idaho News has some of it. It was like split in pieces. And I thought I was just going crazy and just like for some reason like lost my mojo of being able to find things because I could not find it for the life of me today. I was getting like all these snippets in different parts no matter where I was looking, because this was before I started streaming everything. I didn't start streaming stuff from my channel until I think they took control of the cameras. Pretty positive. I think my first live stream of this stuff was like May of 23. No, May of 24. There's only like 40 something live streams on my thing. Not very many for as many freaking videos on this case as there is. So I didn't have it. So I had to go try to figure out why, why I couldn't figure that out. And I found the video that I did about the like breakdown of it. So I'm going to play you guys what I told everyone myself complaining about whenever I talked about this in the first place, so that you guys can see that I'm actually not absolutely insane. I really just couldn't find it because it just absolutely wasn't there. So I'm only going to play like a minute of this because I literally say everything I just said right now about how you couldn't find it anywhere. Let's see. I'm only going to play like a minute of this, and then there's another breakdown of what was said that I'm going to show you guys later that's in this because they reference this specific hearing. Okay, so actually, we'll just play it like this.
All of this. Oh, and I will say, it took me like 3 different channels to be able to actually watch this entire hearing at length. Because Court TV, when they were playing it yesterday, it was basically like watching cable. So there was all these commercials and stuff in between, and a lot of it was being talked over. And so a lot of it got missed, honestly, which is another reason why I was following the News Nation guy on Twitter and posting his updates from inside the courtroom on my community tab. And if you guys haven't seen that, all of those are still on there, or y'all can just go to Twitter and just follow the thread yourselves. But he had a lot of really good information that he was putting out to Twitter while we were having all these weird breaks in the courtroom. So after a while, we went over to watch it on the East Idaho News, which a lot of you guys know that channel from the Dylan Rounds case. But they were having a lot of issues. And then the very last part of all of the scheduling and stuff just was never uploaded to East Idaho News. So then I had to go find it on the Law and Crime Network. And it was so difficult to hear. I don't know where all of a sudden hurricane winds came from. But almost everything that Barlow was trying to say was completely unintelligible. It took me, I don't even know how many times of listening to her just to try to get a little bit of information. But what she had to say, it didn't really seem like it was anything too much different than anything else that we'd already heard.
So this was the one hearing that was all over the place. And like I said, in that video, you obviously couldn't hear anything that half of them were saying. The microphones were all over the place. Okay. I don't know why this specific hearing is so screwed up for literally no reason at all. But this is the one that they're referencing in this document. Now, they're not really saying too much of anything special, honestly. It's the same old, same old. Now, they're going to mention some documents. And like I said, I put the documents with my notes in the members only folder. And I'm going to add some more stuff like as we're going through everything. But I found it interesting. Who has what shirt? I got it at Rouse. I got it out, Ross. And that the murder show, Comfy Clothes and Maybe Three People. My sister got me that for Christmas. Yeah, it's really comfortable too. I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, this is like the same old argument that they always have, but they mentioned some documents in here, and I noted right here that they're missing one of them that goes in between this, which should have been included in their little timeline. And then they also mislabel one of them because there's nothing for the motion to compel notice of defensive alibi on the 22nd. It's actually the 27th that it got posted. That's funny that y'all all have the same shirt. We should just start a club. So let's go ahead and read this one. And then as we're going through them, I'm going to show you the documents that I have pulled up and just like show you the little highlighted parts. Okay, before we even start this, have you guys ever heard of a case where, let me see how I can like put the question, where proof of an alibi or something like that, like was never just allowed in ever? Like I know damn well that there's people that do exactly what he's claiming that he did, that he just like got his car in the middle of the night, went driving, and from the direction that they're claiming that he went, there's no service out there. We know that from people that are here in YouTube land that have gone out there themselves and shown us. We also know that there's been correspondents that work for mainstream channels. The one that mainly sticks in my brain is the correspondent that was out in Pullman that works with Vinnie Politan. And he went all the way out there and even said on the live that he could not get on the broadcast until he got back into Pullman because there was no service. There was no service. So have y'all ever found it? Well, see, the thing about that is like Delphi. Like I think back on Delphi. I really do I think back on Delphi because they literally put that man in prison because his voice sort of sounded like Bridge Guy. Like nothing, there was nothing else. There was nothing else. So then whenever I think about everything that they would like Delphi has already gotten rid of, like been able to get away with, I really wonder like how this case is going to end up going. Because if Bryan, like I said, has been claiming the entire time, he's going to use the evidence they are pushing against him to prove that they are pointing it at the wrong guy. They're literally stating here that they don't want that to happen. And they've been saying that for a while, that they want his ability to come up with a third-party alibi from cross-examination or anything else to be not allowed. To be not allowed. And see, that's the thing about the devices. This is my thing too. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is the only one that I've followed this closely. Like I've never gone in and really cared too much for like the documents, but that's before, like I said, I didn't realize how much we were all being lied to by like crime stuff. Like I've been against mainstream and knowing that they've been playing with us and the government's been playing with us. Like I basically was like raised knowing that, but I didn't really think until, I don't know, a few years ago, like how much they really lie about these court cases. Like I knew like celebrity stuff, like big high profile stuff. Yeah, there's probably some shenanigans going on. Okay. But like small town stuff like this, I knew that there was like a small town corruption. I just didn't realize like how horribly ridiculous it was. I guess it's like hard to explain. Like I kind of always knew this kind of stuff happened, but I never really just knew like how intricately detailed and ridiculous it was. And you really don't know that until you really dig. You really just don't know. And see that right there, the phone. How can they stop him from presenting his own phone data? You know what I mean? Like if they're saying you can't use cross-examination, you can't use anything else, like they're going to say, I mean, we've heard it all before, but can they actually stop him from using his own phone data? That's where I was going with it, the phone data. Yeah, it's very shocking to see it all play out in real time. Like, I think that, like, some of y'all heard the story that I put out about my uncle's case. I really feel like there's some, like, small town shenanigan cover-up stuff because the dude that we think is involved is a snitch, is a big snitch, and he's, like, responsible for, like, 2 other people's deaths. Like, I already know this stuff plays out. But this is crazy. I haven't heard that he's not. I know that he came out and he testified, and it's just not time for him to say nothing right now. We're not at trial. He came out and said what he had to say. And he'll be saying it again, I guess, come trial, as far as I know, unless this happens, unless somehow he gets blocked, because I'm pretty sure that the court can rule that a certain person cannot testify. But if you're going to sit there and say that after everything that like, let's just say that the possibility comes along to where that actually happens and something gets filed and the court's like, yeah, no, we're not going to allow Cyray to actually come in at trial. Then how are we supposed to think that they're not full of shit? How are we supposed to think that they are letting everything be true and honest? But I just don't see how they can stop him from presenting something that they technically are going to attempt to use against him, even if the way that it's coming across from their experts versus their experts, you know what I mean, is a little bit different. Whoever comes out and actually proves the point, whoever comes out and actually proves it. Because if the timing of him going off network is a 7-minute difference, that's like so much in a car, so much distance in a car. And the fact that Jennings was like, oh, it doesn't even matter which direction he was going when it happened, excuse me. That's how you like try to calculate it in your freaking head as a person who's trying to put the storyline together. That's how you figure that out. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Like, Jennings herself makes me absolutely sick. And I know for a fact that she's so adamant about being like this the whole time because her freaking signature is on most of these damn documents from back whenever he was first arrested. It's just crazy to me how she's just been able to just like get away with like a lot. And Hitler like helps her. That's what makes me so sick the most, that Hitler helps her. Okay, we're going to go ahead and read this and I'm going to show you the other documents as we're going through them. Now, again, this is the state's motion in limine to have Bryan Kohberger have no anything whatsoever come from cross-examination or anything else in support of his alibi. They want him to come forward with names and addresses and actual proof himself. That's what they want from him. Comes now the state of Idaho by and through the Latell County prosecuting attorney and respectfully moves the court in limine for an order prohibiting defendant from presenting any evidence, whether by direct or cross-examination, in support of any claimed alibi other than from the defendant himself. They basically want him to get on the stand is what it sounds like. They know he's been standing silent this entire time. They want him to basically take the stand and say himself where he was and prove himself where he was by way of background. And they go on to the very first request of alibi demand. And that's this one from way back in May of 2023. But we also have to remember what else happened in May of 2023. The grand jury. They waited until after the grand jury boo-boo before they even bothered to ask him for the alibi. Now, if they really, really cared about alibi, why didn't they ask about it before they ended up indicting him? I don't see how they didn't think to do that beforehand. So I feel like obviously there's a reason. Now, for some reason, this one right here from the defense of them responding to that original alibi demand is not included in their little list right here. As you notice, I actually put like missing defendant's response from 724. I don't know why. I don't know why they decided not to put this in here, other than the fact that they're just like, we don't have nothing to give you. We're not going to give you anything. It says Mr. Kohberger's defense team continues investigating and preparing his case. Evidence corroborating Mr. Kohberger being at a location other than King Road will be disclosed pursuant to discovery and evidentiary rules as well as statutory requirements. And this is where he basically started what we pretty much knew was going to be happening this entire time. It is anticipated this evidence may be offered by way of cross-examination of witnesses produced by the state, as well as calling expert witnesses to look at the facts and come out and interpret those facts. Not for somebody to get up and be like, oh, well, we went out on a date that night. That's not what he's looking for. He's looking for real facts, science that can be backed. That's what Kohberger is trying to use here. I think that's like hella important because everything that the state's been trying to do, you've got nothing. You've got nothing concrete backing anything at this point, at least nothing that they've come out and been able to prove. Literally nothing that they've been able to come out and prove. Nothing that's stuck. Literally nothing. Literally nothing. So then we have this motion to compel that came out from the state. And this is the one where they have it labeled wrong. And I don't know if there was one file that they removed and then they filed another one, but I went through all of the documents myself earlier today and could not find anything for 7/22 of 23. This document is 7/27 of 23 and signed as such on 7/27 of 23. So I don't know if maybe they just were like looking through things too quickly and thought that that 7 was a 2. I don't know. I've no idea. Now, This is what the state was claiming in this one. And again, these are documents that we've already gone over, but we're refreshing because they're being mentioned. So in this one, they're claiming that they want the specific place or places at which the defendant claims to have been at the time of the burglary and homicides in this case, because that's what is demanded by the law, by this Idaho Code 19-519 and the ICR 12.1, that it's demanded. But he's already said, they've got my phone. My phone is going to prove where I was, and it wasn't there. He said that since he had a Pennsylvania attorney before he ever got back to Idaho. And they've been trying to apparently take that from him from the very beginning, because the number 2 is the names and addresses of all witnesses upon whom the defendant intends to rely to establish such alibi. Well, if you go driving in the middle of the night by yourself, who you got? Nobody. If I didn't have kids, I probably would do the same damn thing. I'd probably get up in the middle of the night if I couldn't sleep and just go for a drive somewhere familiar. That's probably what I would do. I just don't have the capability because I got children's. Now, their whole thing, and I don't disagree with their statement, because we've seen it before with people that we just know are slimy. They wait until they see what evidence they got against them, and then they try to fabricate an alibi. Okay, we've seen it. Don't act like we haven't seen it and been disgusted by it, okay? Because it all gets blown open and we all find out the truth. That's not the case here. He's been literally claiming from the very beginning, even before we even knew who he was exclaiming, they've got all my phone. They've got my information. Why? What? They've got my phone. It's going to prove by my GPS. It's going to prove it. I mean, I don't know how much more consistent somebody has to be. Literally everything that the defense has claimed they were going to do, they've done it. Maybe Anne could be a little bit more strong in the way that she's presenting things. But Hitler doesn't help when he's totally kissing the state's ass for some reason. He's literally Gull, just not as harsh. Actually, maybe just as harsh, because she's denying a lot of stuff in Delphi without even having a hearing. And she knows all the secrets. So she's just nasty. Gull is just nasty. Okay, so then they mention the motion to compel from August 2nd of 2023. And there's really nothing special here in that one. It's just still saying that he's remaining silent and stating that he wasn't at King Road, and that he indicated that he's going to be using corroborating witnesses, which is him coming in and talking to expert witnesses, taking the facts, doing all the things. Now, this is where... Okay, this is the objection. Okay, this is a defendant's paper. This is where we found out that he was actually out driving alone. This is where we got more information. Let me make this one bigger. So this is where we heard this statement. Mr. Kohberger Mr. Kohberger has long had a habit of going for drives alone. Often he would go for drives at night. He did so late on November 12th and into November 13th of 2022. Mr. Kohberger is not claiming to be at a specific location at a specific time. At this time, there is not a specific witness to say precisely where Mr. Kohberger was at each moment of the hours between late night November 12th of 2022 and early morning November 13th of 2022. He was out driving during the late night and early morning hours of November 12th through 13th of 2022. Corroboration of Mr. Kohberger not being at 1122 King may be brought out through cross-examination of the state's witnesses. At this time, Mr. Kohberger cannot be more specific about the possible witnesses and exactly what they will say. But we don't have any of those because he's not bringing any of his own people. So him claiming that is literally just him saying, I know what should be said, but I don't know what they're going to say whenever they get on there. I'm just basically sort of like guessing what's supposed to happen, I guess. Had the state moved forward with the preliminary hearing, the defense would have had the opportunity to develop testimony through cross-examination and witness presentation. Instead, the defense has only received on July 27th of 2023 a copy of the testimony the state chose to elicit. Such review of such is underway. Now, I don't think we talked about this before, but was this like the roommate's testimony? Or is this expert witness testimony that they were talking about back on this time? Because we know that there was a lot of interviews and a lot of stuff done. What date was this? August 2nd of 2023. And see, you know what? I don't disagree. I don't understand why they keep harping on his alibi if they can prove he's the murderer. Exactly. If they know that they have like actual concrete factual proof that he's the dude, then what does it matter what he says? Unless they're just like trying to catch him in a lie, because they try to do that. They try to catch him in lies. But nothing that Kohberger has done has changed. He has not switched up one time. Literally at all. Literally at all. Yeah, exactly that too. There's no proof his phone was actually turned off. Driving beyond the coverage area of towers is the same as turning your phone off. Towers don't know the difference. Exactly. And they have his phone and they still haven't been able to clarify whether he turned it off or it just went off tower. And that's from having like the forensic download. So I'm pretty sure at this point, like if they could have proven that it was like turned off, manually turned off, like he pressed the button and all the things, they would have probably came out and said something by now. They would have snuck something in there by now. But they're not even trying to really defend the fact that they're like 7 minutes of a difference between when they're claiming that the phone went off network is a wild amount of time. A wild amount of time. It really, really is. It really, really is. They go on to say, Mr. Kohberger, again, was out driving alone. Corroborating evidence may come out from cross-examination of state's witnesses. Corroborating evidence may come out from presentation of defense experts. Mr. Kohberger is aware of and will comply with his continuing duty to disclose information. And then they ask, like, basically, they're just like, so stop asking us. Stop asking us. When we get the work product from the defense, then, from the state, then we're going to know what we can actually use that's going to prove the point, because we don't know what they have. All he knows is that whatever they do have, it's pointing at the wrong person, and he's going to freaking pick it apart and prove it. That's what he's going to do. That's a long time, especially driving. It's a super freaking long time. Okay, so, hold on. Share screen. Okay. So then it goes on to talk about the transcript, which we'll get to here in a second. I'll go ahead and read through it because, again, I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't find it any freaking where because it was just mixed up on like 20 different websites. And again, it was before the courtroom took control of the cameras. So it was a disgusting mess. But this is where we actually get into the whole entire point of their motion of limine and the state's argument for this, which is, again, not much has changed. It's literally the same thing. They're just putting more dates and more words behind it. It has now been approximately 20 months since the state first made its request for discovery disclosure / alibi demand on May 23rd of 2023. As the court file reflects, highlighted above, the defendant has failed to comply with the requirements of Idaho Code 15-519 and ICR 12.1. The defendant has yet to specify the specific place or places at which the defendant claims to have been at the time of the alleged offense and the names and addresses of the witnesses upon whom he intends to rely to establish such alibi, as directed by the February 23rd, 2024 order setting deadlines and hearing, and as discussed in the state's April 26, 2024 response to notice of defendant's supplemental response to state's alibi demand. The defendant proffered April 17th, 2024 notice of defendant's supplemental response to state's alibi demand does not comply with the requirements of Idaho Code 19-519 and ICR 12.1 or with the specific directive of the court's February 23rd, 2024 order setting deadlines and hearings. Consequently, the defendant should be prohibited from presenting any evidence, whether by direct or cross-examination, in support of any claimed alibi other than from the defendant himself. Meaning, unless Bryan Kohberger gets up on the damn stand and it comes out of his own face, we don't want to hear it. Right? That's what that says. Let me read it again. Consequently, the defendant should be prohibited from presenting any evidence, whether by direct or cross-examination, in support of any claimed alibi other than from the defendant himself. It comes out of his face. or they don't give a shit. But as I said, just like I've got something to say said earlier, I already had it written right here. The phone data belongs to Bryan. So if he's going to use his own freaking phone data that the state also freaking has, how is that not direct and cross-examination? Because he's going to have a direct witness, a direct expert witness that he is going to talk to himself when it comes to the phone data, the same exact forensic download phone data, and the same exact AT&T data, the same exact everything, okay? How is he not going to be allowed to use that? I mean, what are they going to expect? They're going to want him to get up on the stand and regurgitate all the things that Cy said because it has to come out of his own face? Is that the only way that that's going to work? Well, then he's not going to be credible enough for it to even matter because he's not going to be an expert witness in it. He's just going to be a dude talking. That's all it's going to be at that point. So this is basically saying, unless he gets up there and says it himself, we don't give a shit. But it's his phone data. His phone data is being used on both sides. So I don't see how that's the thing. There has to be something else happening with that because there's no way. They can't sit there and tell him, you can't use your own phone data, but the state can use your phone data. Right? Like that's how I'm getting this. And I just don't see how they can try to say that, regardless of if you're happy with this freaking alibi or not. How can you sit there and just be like, oh, well, you can't use nothing unless you come out and say it. We don't care. Well, then get rid of it then. Get rid of whatever you think is irrelevant because it's his. Because if you don't want him using his own stuff, you shouldn't be able to use it. It should have the same bearing. It should be the same bearing. That doesn't even make any damn sense. Even were the defendant to attempt to comply at this late point in time, the state is irrevocably prejudiced. It has now been over 2 years since the homicides occurred and since the defendant was charged, and it would be unrealistic at this late date to expect the state to effectively investigate and respond to any new or additional alibi-related disclosures. And I put, you got 6 months. If he were to come out today and poop out an alibi, you've got 6 months before trial. I don't want to hear that. You've got an entire freaking team of people. You've got plenty of time. You're just lazy. All of this should have been done a hell of a long time ago. They waste a lot of time doing a lot of nothing. Let's be serious. Let's be so for real. This is precisely the situation that caused concern for the Idaho Court of Appeals in State versus Juarez, as well as the concerns of the United States Supreme Court in Williams versus Florida, where the court noted the ease with which an alibi can be fabricated and the state's interest in protecting himself against an 11th hour defense is both obvious and legitimate. That's exactly the same thing that we just talked about. The fact that we know, and we've been disgusted ourselves with people that have come out here and waited and waited and waited so that they can fabricate an alibi that makes them look innocent when they're not. Or people that instantly knew the case fact and were like, oh no, we gotta wait. And then they end up getting people to lie for them. Ron Logan. Okay. I understand that point. But when the man has been saying, but they've got my phone is going to prove exactly where the shit I was since the second that he got arrested, how am I supposed to say that doesn't have more credence to me? That definitely has more credence to me than sitting there saying, oh, well, they're just waiting for everything so they can fake an alibi. Bro, y'all don't even have freaking strings of video of this car that's the exact same car. Y'all don't even have an actual like path that you can say this car went. Y'all literally told us already in the probable cause order, there's no cameras this way and there's no cameras this way either. Like y'all have already told us. Y'all don't have anything proof-wise. I don't know why they keep playing these games. I guess they just expect the majority of people to be stupid, but they also expect the majority of people to not read all this crazy stuff. And I'm this close to not wanting to, but then it makes me just want to even more because I know that they're hiding crap and I know that they're full of it. They're full of it. The Supreme Court held the adversary system of trial is hardly an end in itself. It is not yet a poker game in which players enjoy an absolute right always to conceal their cards until played. We find ample room in that system, at least as far as due process is concerned, which is designed to enhance the search for truth in the criminal trial by ensuring both the defendant and the state ample opportunity to investigate certain facts crucial to the determination of guilt or innocence. So shouldn't that tell you that if they don't like this whole, oh, they're going to conceal their cards and have cards up their sleeve game, if the state's saying that they don't like that, then doesn't that sort of like make you believe that they ain't got shit else to come trial? that we've seen it all, if they don't want to conceal no cards, if they don't want everybody playing all these games and tricks, and that means that all their cards are on the table too, right? Like that means that we've already seen everything they've got to play with. Not impressed. Not impressed. That's a telling statement. For these reasons, the court should issue an order prohibiting defendant from presenting any evidence, whether by direct or cross-examination, in support of any claimed alibi other than from the defendant himself. If Judge Hippler approves this shenanigans, we might have to protest. Because what? Because what? Y'all are wild. Y'all are absolutely insane. How are you going to sit there and say he can't use his own phone stuff? That's wild. Wild and dumb. And how are we supposed to believe that's how things normally work? It's just dumb. Okay, we're going to get into the thingy. We're going to get into the transcript. Because again, I couldn't find the clip because the freaking motion is all over the place. I looked for like an hour and a half trying to find this. Going through transcripts, Control F, Alibi, Control F, Compel, all these things, trying to find where they were talking about this in all these different sections. Couldn't find it. Couldn't find it. Couldn't find it. Okay. This is just really small, and it's honestly, it was a little bit confusing. I think what they're trying to say is that the transcript itself is from August 18th of 2023 because it talks about it being before the actual preliminary hearing that we were supposed to have October of 2023. But then it also mentions right here another date of August 29th, 2024. And this is just stating that this August 18th, 2023 situation was brought up again at the hearing on August 29th of 2024. I don't really know why they felt the need to put that portion in this, because it's very obvious that the transcript conversation itself is from the 2023 hearing. It made it a little bit confusing, but I'm pretty sure that that's all it means. But again, I don't know why they're mentioning it because we're in 2025. Okay, so this is the court stating, and this is Judge. Remember that. This is Judge. This is back in Latah. The court. Okay, so next motion, I believe, is the state's motion to compel notice of defense of alibi. Mr. Thompson. Oh, here goes Santa Claus talking. Yes, sir. Thank you. And Judge, since the filing of our motion, looking at the defense's response, it looks like we have made a little bit of progress. The defendant has at least, Mr. Kohberger has at least, now stated that his alibi is he was out driving around that night. We knew that already, and if that's his alibi, so be it. What the defendant has still failed to do is to comply with Idaho Code 19-519 and Idaho Court Rule 12.1 that specifically requires a defendant to identify the names of witnesses who will be called to support the alibi along with their addresses. The defendant has only said, well, I may do that, or I may call witnesses, or I'll do it through cross-examination, and of course, I have the right to testify on my own behalf. We don't question that. At this late date, I do not believe it is possible, even if the defense were to provide a list of the names of witnesses and addresses today, that with everything else that needs to be done leading up to a week before October the 2nd, that there is in any way that the state could reasonably be expected to respond as contemplated by the rule and the statute. See, even back then, 2 years ago, they were complaining saying, oh, well, even if we were to get the information today, we just wouldn't have enough time. What is enough time for y'all? Like, I understand, like, maybe like August 18th to October 2nd really probably wouldn't be enough time. But here we are in February 2025. Y'all just said the exact same shit, and we are 6 months away from trial. So it's just like a regurgitated, recycled excuse. Can we like be a little bit creative? Can we be a little bit original? Because it's really getting just old to keep like reading this exact same tired, dragged out bullshit. Seriously. So the state's position at this point is that we will accept what the defendant has said, that he was driving around. although he should specify where he was driving. If he's not going to call anybody else, if he's not going to offer evidence from anybody other than himself, and that's none of our business. Okay, but that's what he's doing. He's telling you that his GPS is going to tell you where he was. He shouldn't have to tell you, I drove out towards Wawaway Park. His phone is going to tell you that. Like, if you actually do your own digging the way that you're supposed to, deep down in the crevices, you're supposed to be able to tell that. So how can they say that he's not saying it? He is saying it. He's saying my freaking phone, my property that is attached to me in every single way that you're trying to say it's attached to me is going to prove that. That's me telling you. That's me telling you. I don't understand. I don't understand why they think that we don't know that this is how this is going to work. So we are willing to accept that with an order from the court prohibiting the defense from offering third-party evidence, whether by direct or cross-examination, in support of defendant's claimed alibi. If he wants to testify to that, that's his prerogative. But at this point, it is too late for the defense to comply with the statute and identify specifically people and their addresses who would testify. So that's where we stand now, Judge. Thank you. Wah, 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 is all that I hear. Judge. All right, thank you. Who do I? Miss Taylor. Miss Taylor. It's me, Judge. I shouldn't even be reading this like this. I'm trying to have fun with it, but it's just so annoyingly stupid. Okay, Judge. All right. Ann Taylor, Your Honor. We have provided to the prosecutor that we can provide to the prosecutor and more. I think that Mr. Thompson is right. We don't have to tell the prosecutor if Bryan is going to testify or what Bryan might say. We have indicated that it's possible that he would have additional things that might come out through expert testimony on cross-examining the state's experts. How is it not okay for Bryan to use the things being said by the state's own experts that the state has to call in order to prove that Bryan Kohberger is the guilty party to the jury? How is he, in turn, not allowed to use that exact same information if indeed it does prove that he's the innocent man, if the state's the one presenting it to the jury? They're going to have to try to make how they think this is going to work make sense. Because I'm not seeing. I'm not seeing how this is supposed to connect the way that they're thinking it's supposed to connect. I just don't. I don't have documentation to give to the state today. I am not going to go into any more about it in this moment. I understand when October 2nd is. Well, we all do, honey. Everybody has access to a calendar. I definitely understand that. And I have heard everybody's thoughts and concerns. I get that. But I mean, this is what we have, and then there is more. And when there is more, I will provide it. And then Judge asked Mr. Thompson if he's got a response. Your Honor, with all due respect, that is exactly what the rule and the statute are designed to prohibit. As the U.S. Supreme Court observed in Taylor versus Williams, the ease with which an alibi can be fabricated, the defense is waiting to gather up evidence, seeing what they can fabricate to match the evidence. No. They've never once ever claimed that they were going to be able to come up with the story later. The story is already in the evidence. That's what they've been claiming. They never said that they were trying to build it out of nothing. The story's already there. The story is already there. It's with the state evidence. It's there already. See, it's just the same argument. They're just repeating the exact same thing. And none of it has any stance, because anyone who's been paying attention knows this is not how they've been claiming this is going to be going. This is not how it's been being played, period. It's not about them claiming anything or them insinuating anything. It's how the game has been being played this entire time. The defense has been the only one consistent. Let's be for real. The defense has been the only one consistent. The state, they've been tripped up no matter which way they turn. No matter which way they turn, they've been completely tripped up. This is annoying. I skimmed through this earlier, but it's just seriously annoying. Okay, then it resumes as Thompson claiming, and in Williams versus Florida, trials are not yet a poker game where players enjoy. Okay, so see, he just like stood up and said the exact same thing. We read that already in the excerpt earlier. So he just reads the excerpt in court. I'm not going to repeat it. Judge then states, okay, thank you. Well, the way I understand this is, and this is in the so-called alibi, not really an alibi, but quote, he was out driving during the late night and early morning hours of November 12th to 13th, 2022. So what I'm going to do, because the next motion is for a scheduling order. I'm going to address this in terms of a deadline, and we'll see how that goes. Right now, that is as far as Mr. Kohberger wants to go with regard to alibi, and that's fine. But if there is going to be, and Ms. Taylor, you suggest that there might be some witnesses, then you need to cough them up by a certain date, certainly before the trial. Before the trial? If magically people pop up out of nowhere, I'm sure it will be before the trial. I have read the Albert case, which was interesting because there were late witnesses. See, if witnesses come forward, then I'm going to lose faith in the story because it changes what they've claimed this whole time. And they've already said in court that he was driving alone. So unless a witness he stopped at a gas station somewhere and saw somebody that he knew, and that's just going to pop up out of nowhere, which I highly doubt. I just don't feel like that's the case. Yeah, I could be wrong. I could be definitely wrong. I'm not looking at it, but then Perez, that was in 2021. That was a court of appeals. And they said, out of luck if you were too late. And so I think, Ms. Taylor, you acknowledge that potential risk to your client in your latest response to the request. So there is, there's some potential balancing there. And certainly Mr. Kohberger doesn't have to say a word, and that is protected by the Constitution of the United States and Idaho. All right, so I think that takes care of it for now until I am going to give you the deadlines. So I think the last motion, then again, this motion to dismiss, and then it just cuts off when it should have honestly cut off like a few minutes before that. That's it. That's really it. It's the same old argument. But Hitler could do something different here. Hitler could put an actual deadline in and be like, yeah, you do something, you present something, or else I just don't really care what you do because it's just not going to be admissible. But again, how can they stop him from using his own phone evidence? The tire marks, the tire marks were there beforehand. I just glanced over and saw that. Yeah, they were there. They were there beforehand. There's a video of Xana, and she's out in front of King Road, and she's got a jersey on, and she's talking about the classes that she's taking and her job and stuff like that. And you can see them. You can see them really dark in the road. They're definitely there. See, if the DoorDash person ends up popping up, that would be really interesting because it could go either way. They could either come out and be like, that's who I saw, bro. Or they can come out and be like, I saw something, but that's not who I saw. Because Dylan didn't see that. Dylan isn't recognizing that. And I know that people react differently to different things. I just don't trust her story. And most of y'all that are in here know why I don't trust her story. Because we've heard things in the background about why we shouldn't trust her story that we knew from beforehand. She changes things up. It's just a lot. That's a good point, Cletus. Cletus says, I'm surprised that Hitler hasn't tried to remove BK's attorney from working on this case the way that moron Judge Gold tried with Richard Allen. I know. Yeah, Richard Allen had hell just trying to keep his attorneys and her trying to pull a bunch of crap put people in place that she goes and she's on their Facebook and commenting on their family vacation photos. Gull, I always say the gall of gall. She's freaking horrible. Horrible. Hey, RV. Prove it, Rebecca. I mean, you can't come in here with exclamation points and no proof. That's not how it works. August. Let's see. I can't remember the exact date. What date? What date does Bryan Kohberger's trial start? It's either August 2nd or August 29th. Hella, I'm wrong. August 11th. August 11th of 25. Yeah. She should be completely disbarred. She's horrible. She's horrible. And knowing that they had so much proof about what Ron Logan said down to certain cuts on one of the girls just a few months after, I'm just how can you just not care? How can you just know that that's there and that the state knew about it? How can you know that Richard Allen actually did have an attorney before the safe handling hearing? Like, how could you know all these things and just not care? I just don't understand it. Hold on one second. But yeah, but that's it. It's the same old argument. And I just don't understand how they can sit there and try to say that unless he basically gets on the stand and says it himself, how can they just like stop him from using his own stuff? How can they stop him from using his own data from social media and emails to prove that he doesn't have a connection to them? How can he be stopped from using his phone data in order for him to be like, well, no, my phone was actually doing this, 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 and this, and y'all are wrong. Y'all are wrong. I don't see how they can be okay with there being a 7-minute difference. Like, for them to act like that 7 minutes doesn't matter, we've kind of known just how pathetic they've been with keeping track of times anyway. The entire timeline changed to fit what they did with Kohberger. They completely threw away any and everything that they were going after prior to Kohberger. You can't sit there and look at Payne's testimony where he's telling two different stories about when the reports came in for the unknown male DNA, because the freaking story that he's telling until he realized that he screwed up was that, yeah, they got the report after they got Bryan's information, but they already had Bryan's information, so they just said, we're going to wait on it. That was said. That's important because Bryan Kohberger's DNA was literally nothing that could be picked up. I have to go run to Walmart when I get off this live because our dryer is still like acting crazy and it's getting fixed tomorrow. And all of our towels are dirty. So I've got to go buy towels. Like, I'm going to go buy a couple of towels at Walmart as soon as I get off of this. I'm going to bring home probably like 30 different freaking DNAs from Walmart. Just for me walking in, grabbing a basket, walking to the aisle, checking to see which towels that I want, grabbing a couple towels, going to the register, scanning, touching the pin code, taking everything back, putting the cart back. I'm going to bring home all kinds of DNA tonight. I know. I'm talking like hella fast because I'm just like aggravated. I'm so aggravated. It's the stupidest stuff in the world. Because they have nothing. And I'm like, they could literally fabricate anything they wanted to against anyone. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen it happen. And then they're in jail for 15, 20, 25, 30 years and then get exonerated. I'm sorry, but if I'm spending 3 decades in prison, I'm going to own the state. Screw you sending me a couple million. I'm about to own the state. I'm about to be governor. Like, what you mean? I'm taking over everything. And it's been happening a lot. And this DNA stuff is the interesting part to it because the DNA stuff's been the one like solving things and taking people back and out of there and putting them where they need to go. But there's also been a lot of mishaps, super lots of mishaps with DNA. I'm going to find the video. I don't really think it has anything to do with this case, but it very much could, especially with what we heard about CS being like on the email that was after the FBI got the information and it's like all redacted and it's the layperson's profile CS and it's connecting to the forensic profile and it shouldn't be able to connect or even see the forensic profile. I'm really wondering if the CS person is like a federal agent who took a DNA profile from one of the matches that Othram had from the tree that they figured out, or from the tree that ISP started creating whenever they got the 4 brothers information. I wonder if they took a DNA profile that was already found from the sample and used it and just labeled it SC and lied about who it was. Because this one lady said, I think I've mentioned this before, she went on to find her biological father, and one of the people that ended up getting contacted as like a relative or whatever said that it wasn't actually that person's DNA that was uploaded, that they purposely uploaded DNA with like another person's identity attached to the DNA sample. So obviously they don't do a lot of cross-checking to like validate if the right DNA is connected to the right name, which is freaking scary. Because like some rando could like swab anything that somebody leaves anywhere and pop a label on it that's fake and turn it in. And then all kind of crap happen. It's just too much. It's just too much. But I'm going to go run to Walmart and buy some towels. We're going to go live again tomorrow. And we're going to end up going over probably the both. Let me see how big these are. Let's see. Yeah, the alternative perpetrator one is only like 4 pages. Let's see how big these are. You know what? We can just do these now. We can do these now because they're small. Let's just go ahead and do these now. And I'll just change the whatchamadoodler. Hold on, where am I at? Take this out. Let's just do this now because there's only like a little bit of information. And Walmart's not closing right now, so we're good. Let's just read these real quick because there's not a lot here. We're going to go ahead and read through the alternative perpetrator evidence one. There's not a lot here, which I'm really kind of like disappointed about because I really thought there was going to be more information on this, but I think they're trying to be vague on purpose. I think they're doing it on purpose. They know that we know that they know that we know that they were looking at other people because they were chasing cigarette butts and going out towards Kendrick and Troy, and not a damn thing about Bryan Kohberger was on their radar. Literally nothing. They even said, remember, they even said that the whole thing about the missing front plate didn't actually matter in the end because it wasn't important to the Bolo until after they knew that Bryan Kohberger came from Pennsylvania. Because it wasn't actually noticeable on if it was missing a front license plate or not. The angle and the way that the camera at 11:12 showed didn't show that portion for them to be able to validate one way or another. So the original Bolo didn't have anything to do whatsoever with the front license plate being missing. And that's important. And I think the fact that Judge Hippler knows that it's important and he's still playing like it's not important is pretty stupid. It's pretty dumb. We're going to go ahead and run through these because, like I said, they're only a few pages. This one is the perpetrator evidence one, and it's 4. And then the neuropsych is only 3. That way, if some new stuff drops tomorrow, we can instantly start with the new stuff. So that, remember, we're going to be doing like 2-hour blocks pretty much like every day. Once these new 43 files drop, the ones that we can actually view, once, we're going to do 2 hours a day until we're all caught up. So let's go ahead and start with this one. This is the state's motion in limine regarding the alternative perpetrator evidence. Comes now, the state of Idaho, by and through the Latell County prosecuting attorney, and respectfully moves the court in limine for an order prohibiting the defendant from offering alternative perpetrator evidence or argument without first satisfying the court that any such evidence is relevant, inadmissible pursuant to IRE 401, 402, and 403. In support of this motion, the state refers the court and counsel to State versus Meister, where the Idaho Supreme Court addressed the standard for assessing the admissibility of alternative perpetrator evidence. 148 Idaho, okay, it's just the year of the case. In Meister, the Idaho Supreme Court held the Idaho Rules of Evidence adopted in 1985 implicitly overruled State versus Larson from 1966. The proper analysis is under IRE 401, 02, and 03. Citing to State versus Self from 2003, the Idaho Supreme Court noted the trial court must first consider and determine, make this a little bit bigger for y'all. The trial court must first consider and determine whether the proffered evidence is relevant under IRE 401 at 241. I guess that's like where in the rule it's claiming that. The second step is to determine whether the probative value of the proffered evidence is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice, confusion of the issues, or misleading the jury, or by considerations of undue delay, waste of time, or needless presentation of cumulative evidence. Meaning what? If the state doesn't deem that it's got to wait, then it's not going to be allowed. Or if the court doesn't care about what the maybe theory could be, then it's not going to be allowed to even be talked about. I know that in Delphi, they weren't allowed to do none of it. It's not on the screen. Well, now it's on the screen. But I know in Delphi, they weren't allowed to do anything. They weren't allowed to talk about anything. Not even the stuff that was literally written out by the feds. And when I tell you that Odin report cost lives, that Odin report cost lives. I'm talking people getting shot in front of federal buildings lives. Okay, that thing was written and caused problems. For what? For what? If it wasn't relevant at all. But then you think about the Ron Logan stuff, and it's very confusing. But the simple fact that there was nothing else offered, that doesn't make sense, because those stories make more sense than what they're trying to say with Richard Allen. They have no freaking proof. And the stuff that they did present in court, they couldn't even do it correctly. It didn't match the right way. The right testing didn't produce the results that it was supposed to. They had to do different things in order to produce the same results, meaning they fabricated their freaking evidence. And that's what they're doing here. That's definitely what they're doing here. The Idaho Supreme Court stated, if the defendant proffers evidence which merely tends to mislead the jury that another person committed the crime, or the evidence is not relevant because it does not tend to make the defendant's involvement more probable or less probable, then it is within the trial's court's discretion to find the evidence inadmissible. Mere inferences that another person could have committed the crime will most likely not be relevant, and if relevant, will still be subject to the limitation provisions of IRE 403. In this case, during the course of the investigation, literally thousands of tips regarding possible perpetrators were received by law enforcement. No one cares about those tips. We care about the unknown freaking blood. We care about the unknown blood. No one cares about your tips. You didn't even go and get the tips for the suspect you ended up having in the long run. You didn't even go look at anything regarding WSU or anything until after you had Bryan Kohberger's name. They already know that they have the email correspondences to prove that. That 1129 tip didn't do shit but get put in a stack and forgotten. Okay? It didn't pop up until later. So I don't care. I don't care about the tips. We care about the blood, the unknown male blood. Let's talk about that when it comes to possible other perpetrators. Give us those answers. Okay. With the exception of information regarding the defendant, none of these tips were substantiated. None of them were substantiated, including the ones about Bryan, because you didn't even go and find them. They are so stupid. The state submits that any attempt by the defendant to offer or argue an alternative perpetrator theory without evidence specifically connecting person or persons other than the defendant to the homicides would do nothing more than mislead and confuse the jury and would also result in undue delay, waste of time, would be a needless presentation of cumulative evidence, and unfairly prejudice to the state. Under the Supreme Court's ruling in Meister, this should be prohibited. The state respectfully submits that the defendant should be precluded from offering or arguing alternative perpetrator evidence without first meeting the relevance and admissibility thresholds of IRE 401, 02, and 03 as analyzed by the Meister Court. Well, let's just go see what this says. Okay, so test for relevant evidence is 401. Make this bigger. Okay. Let's just open it and see if it gives me all of it in one page. No. Okay. So, okay. 401, Idaho Rules of Evidence 401, test for relevant evidence. Evidence is relevant if it has any tendency to make a fact more or less probable than it would be without the evidence, and the fact is of consequence in determining the action. Okay, so now give me 402. I don't even need to open it. I'm just going to read it from this part right here because it's the exact same thing. So 402 is general admissibility of relevant evidence. Relevant evidence is admissible unless these rules or other rules applicable in the courts of this state provide otherwise. Irrelevant evidence is not admissible. Well, I'd hope not. But maybe they should take their own freaking words and practice what they preach. IRE 403 is the federal rule of 403. That's not what I want. I want this 403 IRE. Here we go. Excluding relevant evidence for prejudice, confusion, waste of time, or other reasons. So it's the exact same thing he just said. It's the exact same thing that he just said. So can they just be like, oh, you're not allowed to come out and say anything at all? Or is the defense team going to have to like meet with Judge Hippler and show him all of their evidence, and then he gets to decide if they can actually come on and talk about it? Like, does Hippler get to allow this? He gets to make the decision? Y'all are giving this person too much like time. They can't answer a question. They can say whatever they want to, but they don't have any proof. What are you even like bothering? Why are you here? You realize that you had to subscribe and sit there for like 10 minutes, right? You're kind of like dumb. I will talk all the shit about all the lawyers and all the judges and all the cops and all the feds, because how many freaking cases are out there where they've done something wrong? Do you realize Idaho like was one of the first states to want to abolish the Fed? Maybe like do some work, some actual like work, looking at things and going and doing your own research and not just like following stupid people. Maybe if somebody wasn't lying to you 24/7, you wouldn't feel so ridiculous, because you're like the only one in here being a shit face. And we have people in here all the time that think that Bryan is guilty, but they don't come in here being stupid like you. There's literally guilters in this chat right now that are not acting like you do. So you are the problem. You are the problem. Anyway, let's go and read the neuropsych one now. Now, we already saw in the case summary listing that they do have information being presented about autism, which is interesting. And we also learned in the members only live, I did not know this. Somebody said it to me, and I went and Googleated it and showed it to you guys, that there's no mental health defense or anything in Idaho. Let me pull it back. Let me pull up the way that I had found it before. Insanity, I think. Insanity, Idaho. Let's see. Not available. Okay, see. Although the insanity defense is not available in Idaho, a defendant is permitted to use evidence of mental illness to undermine the prosecution's proof that he was capable of forming the intent necessary to commit the charged crime or mens rea. So even though you can't be like, oh, I'm actually crazy, you can sort of use it as a crutch, I guess, is what it sounds like, right? Sort of like a crutch. You can use it kind of like a crutch, but you can't use it as a full-on excuse to try to get out of stuff, is what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like to me. Okay. State's motion in limine regarding the neuropsychological and psychiatric evidence. Comes now, the state of Idaho, by and through the Latah County prosecuting attorney, and respectfully moves the court for an order in limine prohibiting defendant from offering testimony regarding neuropsychological evaluation and psychiatric evaluation of the defendant as summarized in the defendant's January 23rd, 2025 supplemental response to request for discovery regarding expert witnesses. Specifically, the state objects to the proposed testimony of expert witnesses identified in the defendant's Exhibit D-7 and D-13 appended to defendant's supplemental response to discovery for discovery. Supplemental response to request for discovery regarding expert witnesses. This is for the mitigation stuff that was put in. This is where the autism stuff is coming in. In support of this motion, the state respectfully refers the court to Idaho Code 18207, which provides that mental condition shall not be a defense to any charge of criminal conduct except expert evidence on the issues of any state of mind, which is an element of the offense. Meaning, whatever they are deeming is wrong with Kohberger, which is probably the autism, doesn't have anything to do with the reasoning for why I guess the state thinks he would have done it in the first place, because that's pretty much what it says, that it can't be used unless an element of the offense, which is the state, right? Which is the state. In each of the witness summaries, the defendant specifically states the testimony is not intended to be a mental element defense pursuant to Idaho Code 18207, but rather this testimony is about the state of mind, as well as factual defense testimony to anticipated testimony elicited by the state. As such, this proposed testimony falls outside of the mental condition evidence allowable, meaning it's irrelevant. Meaning it's irrelevant. So I don't know why they're even having, honestly, to put anything in here about him being autistic, if him being autistic is irrelevant to the state. I don't know why they have to file it then. I guess because of the mitigation thing for like just in cases, so that in case something does actually go wrong, which let's be for real, Delphi is already proven it's probably going to go wrong. And we're probably going to end up in a huge appeals process is probably going to be what ends up happening here. Let's be so serious. But if him having some sort of version of autism is irrelevant, I don't know why it has to be even discussed by the state. They can't really say, oh, well, we don't want them having this in here if it's part of the mitigation process that they have to file it. Like, that's pretty much telling them they can't follow the rules. Well, we'll see if it's not for mitigation or not, but all that stuff was coming up at the same time. All the mitigation stuff, the death penalty stuff, like a bunch of this stuff was coming up. So we'll see. I mean, who's proved it though, Janine or Jean? Who's proved it? Because I don't see anybody proving it, and I've looked everywhere to prove it. All I know is this, and this is why I haven't talked about it yet, because I'm going to contact Tapatalk myself and ask them the question. That profile has not been active since 2012. So if somebody would have in 2022, whenever Bryan Kohberger's name became public, went on there and changed the name to match an email address that people claim belonged to Bryan Kohberger, and to then put a picture on it that looks just like Bryan Kohberger from whenever he was a teenager that we've seen several times, it would probably hopefully show that the profile was active in 2022, but it doesn't. It says it was active in 2012. So if I get a hold of Tapatalk, because I don't care what somebody says, if I get a hold of Tapatalk and they tell me, no, if somebody went in and updated the username and the profile picture, it would have said that the last active date was in 2022, then I'll believe that they're not his. But if they say, no, other way around. No, that way. If it does change whenever the information is updated, then I will not believe that they are authentic. But if that profile has not been touched since 2012, and if nothing has been updated on it, including the username and the profile since 2012, then it's his. Then it's his. And that's why I need to get a hold of Tapatalk. No, the defense never talked about it. The only thing that the defense has claimed is that there's no social media connections between him and anybody belonging to King Road. But they've never said anything about Tapatalk as far as I know of. But that's my thing. That's why that's what I started thinking about whenever I saw it. If the profile and the username were updated after Bryan Kohberger's name became public, it would have probably said active last in 2022. But it says active last in 2012. So it depends on what Tapatalk says. And of course, I'm going to come out here and tell y'all what it says. Because if they say, no, it would have updated the active date and it hasn't been touched in over 15 years, then it's him. And just because he might have had issues, we already know he had issues as a kid. Okay, we already know that he went from 1 to 100 with H real quick. Okay, that doesn't just happen. We're not stupid here. We know that doesn't just happen, but we also know that the majority of us, we all remember what it was like growing up and not really quite understanding certain things, or maybe thinking a certain way or feeling a certain way, like you're different from everybody else. A lot of us were like that. I know I was. I've been the black sheep my whole life because I've never shut up. I've never been quiet. I've never sugarcoated anything. And that's just how it is. So again, I'm going to find out from Tapatalk myself. I'm going to contact them myself and see what they say. Because what they say about how that works is going to prove one way or another. It's going to prove one way or another. Well, and see, that's a good point for why I feel like the defense would want to show that he does have autism, regardless of if the state wants to use it or not, because it definitely shows like why certain people would feel like certain ways about his whatever tendencies he might have. But we also have to remember that there's plenty of people that really felt like Bryan Kohberger was a safe person to be around. There was people that went running with him only at night because they felt safe. There's the woman whose place was broken into, that somehow him being the nice friend who the woman trusted to help her get a security system together, suddenly the mainstream media turned that story into, oh, he must have actually been the one that broke into her apartment. so he could coax her and persuade her and manipulate her into allowing him access. They created this horrible story out of nothing. They created this horrible story out of somebody who was like, no, he was nice to me. He helped me. They created a monster with no proof. And Nancy Disgrace went with that so hard. It's so gross. So gross. Yeah, you can. You can definitely do pickup and still end up coming home with 1 million people's DNA, especially since that one worker is hopping all over the store, touching on everything. Touching on everything. It's just all ridiculous. So yeah, speaking of Walmart, I've got to go get towels. It's already almost 10 o'clock. So wish me luck not bringing home 1,000 germs. Okay. To my email, I'll check it before I leave the house. What is this? If to sales gave too much, FERPA may apply. HIPAA and on spectrum. My least fave term, awkward, is not okay. I believe defense is okay, pro afraid, because routines make it easier. Yeah. That's true too. Because, I mean, if he was autistic, a lot of autistic people are really strict with the way that they do certain things. And there could always be like certain paths he takes all the time, a complete like creature of habit for sure. It's just a bunch of wild stuff. But at least now we're done with all the documents that are there so far. Maybe tomorrow we're going to start getting some, because all of those titles posted in the case summary. And normally the very next day that is posted on the case summary, they come public, but they've been already like hella slow, like really slow. And if they've got this many to file, I don't know when we're going to see them. I'm hoping tomorrow. So at least now we're caught up and we can start with whatever new happens. And since we're going to be doing these live blocks at night, or at least that's how so far it seems like that's how it's going to be working, since we've got so much coming, I am going to try to take some time during the day to get some videos that I can put out in the morning, because there's stuff that needs to be updated. I talked about the I can't remember if it's Asha or Asha degree case, the little girl that disappeared like forever ago. She literally packed up her backpack in the middle of the night for no reason and just like left in the freaking middle of a storm. There were 2 eyewitnesses that saw her, but nobody stopped to help her, and then she just vanished. And now we had like some recent stuff going on with a family that is like pretty much suspected of doing some crazy shit to her. There's some text messages that got released. I talked about it on Monday, and we still haven't had the time to do it. So I need to get like some of those things updated for like during the daytime videos, since we're going to be doing all this at night with this case. I mean, honestly, look what they did with Richard Allen, though. Like they tortured the hell out of that man. And it's really, you really got to wonder now, because maybe that's the reason why Latell County maybe was a little bit more like lenient with him. Not only because they probably knew that this was all bullshit, but because they knew of his autism. And there's a lot of difference here. Like ever since he got to Boise, like he's lost a lot of weight and he does not look healthy. Like he's kind of turning into Richard Allen. But I guess we won't see him again in court until April 9th is, I think, the next court date. So we'll see if he's got some weight back on him or if he's getting skinnier. I have no idea. But hey, I'm going to go buy towels, swimming through a swamp of DNA on my way to the towel section. But thanks for joining in, you guys. I'm sorry that it ended up being so late, but it didn't go as long as it could have, because we got those documents done and over with. But y'all have a super great night. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being here. Thank you for wanting to be here for the rest of these two, because it's going to be a long ride until they're all done. Y'all have a super, super great night. See y'all. Please do not forget to leave a like on your way out and subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed already.